Today is day 2 of PR 30, press record 30. Today we're going to be talking about something that's near and dear to my heart, and it's the idea of the scholar athlete. You may have heard Zach talk about the artist, athlete, entrepreneur. Something, as I've started writing, and obviously being somebody that loves to work out and health and wellness generally, played college football. I'm an athlete at heart, and I feel like an athlete at heart, but at the same time, I've always loved philosophy. I've always loved reading. And so I've become obsessed with this idea of Plato's scholar athlete. You may have heard of the term scholar athlete. It comes from Plato's Republic, and he refers to it as the guardian rather than the scholar athlete. I wish I had a better term for it than scholar athlete, because a lot of times when we think about scholar, we think about somebody who just gets good grades or is paper smart. The type of scholar I'm talking about is scholar in the ancient sense, and it's a scholar that devotes and dedicates their life to seeking wisdom and searching for wisdom. So constantly studying, seeking, discussing, like they did in the old times. I mean, you had Plato's Academy, you had Aristotle's Lyceum, and they were both of these places where folks interested in the pursuit of becoming a better person gathered, not only to discuss philosophy, but to wrestle and to do physical pursuits. And it was the cultivation of the whole man that, especially in ancient Greece, that they saw as being fundamental to the flourishing of the human spirit and the masculine spirit. And so I've over the last year or so been trying to really nail down what exactly it is I'm trying to embody. Epictetus has a saying about don't explain your philosophy, embody it. And what I'm trying to embody is something like Plato's scholar athlete. So I'm going to read this section of the Republic that it's from. So this comes in book 2. And we're going to skip to a different places, but we're going to start in line 375C. So at this point in the Republic, Socrates is having a discussion about the ideal city, and the ideal city has what Socrates would call the guardians, and this is sort of the people that are trained in philosophy, but also have strong bodies, physically strong, mentally strong, spiritually strong, kind of a whole integrated man is required in order for the ideal city to not only exist, but to thrive. Obviously, at the top, there's something like the philosopher king. But then under that, you need more than just the one king. You need a host of what Plato calls his guardians. So we're going to start at 375C. So he says, Glaucon, Socrates, with such natures, how will they not be savage to one another and the rest of the citizens? This is you're talking about, we're going to have these spirited individuals in the city. How do we keep them from not being savage to one another? Because they're going to have that capacity to be a savage. How do we keep them? By Zeus, he said, it won't be easy. Yet they must be gentle to their own and cruel to enemies. If not, they'll not wait for others to destroy them, but they'll do it themselves beforehand. True, he said. What will we do? I said. Where will we find a disposition at the same time gentle and great-spirited? Surely a gentle nature is opposed to a spirited one. So this is what we find out first, is the guardians need to be gentle, but also great-spirited. And so there's this whole conversation that happens around, is it possible for a man to be both? Ultimately, they come down on the answer is yes. And so now we're going to skip ahead to 376C. Pick up the conversation here. So shall we be bold and assert that a human being too, if he is going to be gentle to his own and those known to him, must by nature be a philosopher and a lover of learning? So this is the key to make them gentle and great-spirited at the same time. Must by nature be a philosopher and a lover of learning. Yes, he said, let's assert it. And this is the key line right here. Then the man who's going to be a fine and good guardian of the city for us will in his nature be philosophic, spirited, swift, and strong. That's entirely certain, he said. Then he would be of this sort to begin with, but how exactly will he be reared and educated by us? And does our considering this contribute anything to our goal of discerning that for the sake which we are considering all these things? In what way justice and injustice come into being in the city? We don't want to scant the argument, but we don't want an overlong one either. So we're not going to go too much into this, but then after they describe what it is that they're after, fine and good guardian, philosophic, spirited, swift, and strong. Then they go into the education. What is it going to take to educate people in order to make them fine, good, spirited, swift, strong, philosophic? And then they talk about myths and they talk about music. But this makes the point that I wanted to make for now, and that is this idea of the philosopher athlete or good guardian. If we think about it from the aspect of just scholar athlete, we can break it down into scholar and athlete. But fragmented wise, say we fragment it into something more like the artist, athlete, entrepreneur. We have to have things on a day-to-day basis that cultivate those aspects of our nature. And I fundamentally believe that this is one of the keys to recovering whatever has gone missing in our society and in sort of the masculine spirit specifically. I'm sure there's a female equivalent, but I just can't really speak to it because I don't have that experience. But as for me, I do know that as I started to be intentional about where I was underdeveloped, and then started pouring into those things, there was a general expansion of flourishing of the spirit that happens. Aristotle has this idea of magnanimity. When magna means big, and animus means soul. So magnanimity means big soul. The ancients had this idea of that's what you should be seeking after is a large soul. And so the question becomes, how do we enlarge the soul? And how we enlarge the soul, if you think about the round, the rotunda, Plato has the idea of the round. If you think about the round, or the circle as the self, split into a bunch of different pieces of pie, each of those pieces being a different aspect of our nature. Say, for instance, like we're talking about, you can fragment it in archetypes and like as many as you want, but say for now we're going to do artist, athlete, entrepreneur, and that's a 3-slice pie. It's worth asking the question in those 3 slices, and maybe they're different for each individual, and they are different for each individual. Which one is underfed and which one might be overfed? Where the wheel only turns if they're all sort of equally cultivated. And to the extent one is overdeveloped and another one is underdeveloped, it makes it a lot harder for that wheel to turn. And so it's important that we can think about this in the context of, for instance, when I was predominantly spending my time as a lawyer, I was working a lot, and I was still working out, but I wasn't really physically taking care of myself. I was just doing the bare minimum needed to maintain sort of a certain level of fitness, and I wasn't riding at all. And so I was really overdeveloped, sort of in just the work capacity. Honestly, that wasn't really artist, athlete, entrepreneur. There was very little scholar in there. There was very little athlete in there. And it wasn't until I started writing on a daily basis, making an effort to have intentional training sessions, prioritizing those things above work, and then stepping into entrepreneurship, that I sort of felt this key piece of me start to flourish that was missing previously. And I think that's the case for a lot of individuals these days is some of the key aspects that make us human and make us who we are and make us whole are being neglected in favor of something that is sucking our spirit, like a job, a 9-to-5 where they're staring at a computer, and then they have little to no energy left to deploy on the things that matter most to them. So that's the topic that I wanted to touch on and introduce today, is this, starting to think about what archetype you want to become. For me, it's something like Plato's guardian, philosophic, strong, swift, spirited. and what it would look like to structure your habits on a day-to-day basis such that you're pouring into those things, such that they are growing and expanding, so that yourself is slowly morphing into the shape that you want it to take. That's the topic of today, and it's something we're thinking about. Until tomorrow, I'm out.